The greatest pain in life is not the loss of love, but pretending you don't feel it. They act like they've moved on, like they've leveled up, glowing and untouchable, living their so-called best life without you. But let me tell you something, my friends, that's a lie. A well-rehearsed, pride-fueled, ego-driven performance. And the science backs it up, because true happiness doesn't need to be proven, it just is. If they were really so unbothered, so free, so over it, they wouldn't need to convince the world or themselves. Before we go any further, do me a favor. Hit that like button, subscribe, and stay with me, because what I'm about to break down is going to change how you see everything. Hey folks, imagine this. You see a clown at a carnival. The makeup is perfect. The costume is bright, and the smile is painted wide. From the outside, pure joy. But take away the mask, step behind the curtain, and what do you find? A tired, lonely face, drained from pretending all day long. That's them. The one who swore they didn't care. The one who's out there flexing their new life. The one who acts like they've never thought about you since the day you left. But here's the truth, they feel it. They feel it. They know what they lost. And no amount of selfies, parties, or fake laughter is going to erase that. Science says the human brain doesn't just move on. It remembers, it attaches, it rewires itself around deep emotional connections. And the more they try to suppress those feelings, the stronger they come back. See, people love to act like happiness is instant. Like they can replace you overnight with a new person, a new hobby, or a distraction. But the mind doesn't work like that. Ever heard of the rebound effect? It's when suppressing emotions actually makes them more intense. It's like trying to hold a beach ball underwater. The harder you push, the faster it pops right back up. And that's exactly what's happening behind the scenes. They act like you don't exist, like you're a distant memory. But then they hear that song, see that place, stumble across an old text, and suddenly, boom, you're right back in their head. The nostalgia hits, the regret creeps in, and they realize they're not as free as they pretended to be. Let's be honest. If they were truly over it, if they had really let go, they wouldn't be watching. But they do. They lurk, they scroll in silence, they check in when you least expect it. Not because they want to come back, no, their pride won't allow that, but because they need to know. They need to see if you're still suffering, still waiting, still holding on. And the moment they realize you're not, that's when it starts to burn. Because, my friends, nothing haunts the mind more than knowing you were once valued by someone who no longer cares. And here's where it gets good. While they sit there, trapped in their own ego, you're free. You're not pretending, you're not playing the same game. You're stepping into the next level of your life, without looking back, without needing their approval, without waiting for an apology that may never come. That's what real happiness looks like. So say it with me. I do not chase. Write it in the comments. Let them see it. Let yourself feel it. Let the world know that you are done with the illusion, done with the mind games, done with proving your worth to someone who had their chance. Press that like button, subscribe, and stay with me. Because what's coming next is going to make sure they never stop thinking about what they lost. Number 1. The science of suppressed emotions. They pretend they're fine. They tell themselves they're over it. They smile, they laugh. They post their little updates as if life has never been better. But my friends, the mind doesn't work that way. The heart doesn't just delete emotions like erasing a file from a computer. That's not how it works. Because the truth, What they're ignoring isn't disappearing, it's growing. The more they shove it down, the more it builds. Like a pressure cooker with no release. Like a fire smothered under a thick blanket, only getting hotter underneath. They think they're controlling it, but deep down, it's controlling them. So folks, imagine this. You're at the beach, holding a beach ball in the water. You push it down hard, thinking, if I just keep it under, it'll stay there. But what happens? The deeper you push, the more force builds up. And the second you let go, boom, that ball doesn't just float back up. It shoots into the air with twice the force. That's exactly what's happening to them. The harder they fight to suppress their feelings, the stronger those feelings become. And one day, they won't be able to hold them down anymore. I know what some of you are thinking, but what if they really don't care? What if I'm just making this up? My friends, if someone truly moves on, they don't have to force it. They don't need to convince the world. They don't need to overcompensate. They don't need distractions. They just live. But what do they do instead? They run. They drown their emotions in fake smiles, forced confidence, new faces, temporary highs. But science says that's not moving on, that's just avoidance. Ever heard of the rebound effect? It's when suppressing emotions makes them stronger. The brain doesn't just forget deep emotional bonds. It doesn't just erase connections that once meant something. It buries them. But buried doesn't mean gone. And here's the kicker. When you bury something and don't deal with it, it doesn't stay buried. It festers, it rots, it grows into something darker, something heavier, something they can't control. That's why, no matter how much they act like you never existed, no matter how much they force that fake happiness, no matter how many distractions they throw in their path, you still live in their mind. Not because you're haunting them, but because they refuse to face what they feel. And let me be clear, they feel it. They feel it when they're alone. They feel it in the silence. They feel it in the random moments, when a song plays, when they see someone who looks like you, when they visit a place you once went together. And that's when it hits them. That's when they realize they haven't escaped anything. But let's talk about why they act like this. Why do they suppress? Why do they pretend? Why do they run from what's so obviously still there? The answer, fear. Because facing real emotions means facing the truth. It means admitting they lost something valuable. It means admitting that they feel pain, that they made a mistake, that their pride isn't enough to protect them from regret, and that's terrifying. So instead, they pretend. They wear the mask, they push everything down, and tell themselves, if I don't think about it, it's not real. But the funny thing about emotions, they don't need your permission to exist. They don't need your approval to surface. And when they finally break, when the distractions stop working, when the noise dies down, when life forces them to sit alone with their thoughts, that's when they'll feel everything they've been running from, because science proves it. What we suppress doesn't disappear, it intensifies. And let me tell you something, my friends, that's not your problem. You don't need to chase them down. You don't need to remind them of what they lost. You don't need to prove anything. Time is already teaching them the lesson for you. And here's the best part. You're not the one trapped in the cycle. You're not the one forcing yourself to believe a lie. You're not the one running from reality. You are moving forward. Because while they struggle to suppress, you embrace, you accept, you deal with the emotions, process them, and come out stronger. And that's why, in the end, you win. Because true strength isn't pretending you don't feel. It's facing what you feel and still choosing to rise. So say it with me. I am stronger than my emotions. Write it in the comments. Show them, show yourself, show the world that you don't need to run from the truth. You face it, own it, and rise above it. Press that like button, subscribe, and stay with me, because what's coming next is going to make sure they never stop thinking about what they lost. Number 2. Social media is a highlight reel, not reality. Let me tell you an eye-opening quote. Don't believe everything you see. Even salt looks like sugar. They post the pictures, they smile for the camera. They write captions dripping with confidence, like life has never been better without you. But my friends, don't fall for the illusion. What they show online is not reality. That's a performance, a carefully crafted, highly filtered, ego-driven highlight reel designed to convince the world, and more importantly themselves, that they're fine. But the truth, science proves, they're not. So folks, imagine this. You walk past a house at night, and from the outside it looks perfect. The lights are on, the curtains are open just enough to show a cozy, picture-perfect scene. But what you don't see are the cracks in the walls, the mess hidden behind closed doors, the arguments happening just out of sight. That's social media, that's what they're doing. They show you the curated version, the best angles, the fake laughs, the polished moments. But the parts that matter, the emotions, the struggles, the truth that stays hidden. And I know what some of you are thinking. But what if they really are happy? What if they truly moved on? My friends, real happiness doesn't need to be broadcasted. Think about it. When you're genuinely happy, when life is truly good, when your peace is real, you're too busy living it to prove it to anyone. The loudest people in the room, the ones constantly trying to convince the world how happy they are, they're usually the ones struggling the most. And here's where science comes in. Studies show that people use social media as a coping mechanism, a way to distract, to seek validation, to escape their reality. They post not because they feel amazing, but because they need to feel amazing. It's not about sharing happiness, it's about manufacturing it. And let's talk about those glowing selfies. That one perfect shot that looks effortless, but took 50 different angles, the right lighting, and 10 minutes of editing just to get it right. Does that look like someone who's truly free? No, that's someone working overtime to control the narrative. And here's where it gets deeper. Social media gives people a sense of control over perception. They can't control the thoughts in their mind, the emotions that creep up at night, the way certain memories still hit them when they least expect it. But what they can control is what you see, what the world sees. So they use it. They shape their story to make sure you believe they're winning, even when they're losing. And let's not forget the real reason they post. You ever notice how people will go weeks without sharing anything, but suddenly, when they think you're moving on, boom, suddenly they're everywhere. The cryptic captions, the new selfies, the forced group photos that scream, "Look at me, look at how good I'm doing." That's not peace, that's panic. Because the moment they feel you slipping away, the moment they realize you're not watching, that's when they try the hardest to remind you they exist. And the best part, they think you don't see through it. They think you'll sit there wondering, doubting, overthinking. But you, my friends, you're smarter than that. Because while they're busy proving, you're busy living. While they're curating their best angles, you're walking forward without needing an audience. And that's why in the end, you win. Because the happiest people aren't the ones with the most likes, the best filters, or the most staged. I'm doing great posts. The happiest people are the ones who don't need to prove anything at all. So say it with me. I see through the illusion. Write it in the comments. Show them. Show yourself. Show the world that you are done falling for the highlight reel. And stay with me, because what's coming next is going to make sure they never stop thinking about what they lost. Number 3, the psychological need for validation. They act like they don't care. Like life has never been better. Like losing you was the best thing that ever happened to them. But my friends, if that were true, they wouldn't need to prove it. Because real happiness doesn't need an audience. It doesn't need an approval rating. It doesn't need to be broadcasted, posted, flaunted, or exaggerated. It just exists. But what do? They overcompensate. They put on a show. They laugh too loud, flex too hard, and try too much. And that's not confidence, that's insecurity in disguise. So folks, imagine this. You're at a party and someone cracks a joke. It's mildly funny at best. Most people chuckle or maybe nod. But then there's that one person laughing uncontrollably, slapping their knee, acting like it's the funniest thing they've ever heard. And in that moment, you know it's fake, it's forced, it's performative. Because when something is truly funny, you don't have to force yourself to react. And when someone is truly happy, they don't have to work this hard to prove it. And that's exactly what's happening with them. They think that if they just act happy enough, if they convince enough people, it will become real. But science says the opposite. Psychologists call it overcompensation. It's when people try so hard to appear unaffected that they actually expose how deeply affected they are. Ever notice how the ones who brag about how much fun they're having, how much they don't care, how quickly they've moved on, are always the ones who seem to be doing the most? That's not peace. That's proof of inner turmoil. Because if they were really unbothered, they wouldn't need to tell anyone. They wouldn't need to show you. They wouldn't need to perform. But I know what some of you are thinking. But what if they really are happier without me? What if they truly don't care? My friends, let's be honest. If they were really happy, they wouldn't have to announce it. Think about the happiest moments of your life. Did you stop to take a picture? Did you pause to post about it? No, you were too busy living it. And yet, what do? They flood their feed with updates, with proof that they're thriving. But proof of what? Proof to who? Because let's be real. Who are they really trying to convince? They don't need to prove it to strangers online. They don't need to prove it to their new friends. The only person they really need to convince is themselves. Because deep down, they feel it. The hole where you used to be, the quiet moments they don't post about, the thoughts they can't escape at night. But instead of sitting with those feelings, instead of facing the truth, they run from it. They cover it up. They drown it in distractions, in fake confidence, in validation from people who don't even know the full story. And that's where they lose. Because no matter how much external validation they seek, it will never fill the void inside. That's the difference between them and you. You don't need to prove anything. You don't need an audience. You don't need to force happiness because your peace is real. And that's why, in the end, you win. Because the one who truly moves on isn't the one who shouts it the loudest. It's the one who doesn't need to say anything at all. So say it with me. I need no validation. Write it in the comments. Show them, show yourself, show the world that your happiness isn't up for debate. Press that like button, subscribe, and stay with me. Because what's coming next is going to make sure they never stop thinking about what they lost. Number 4. The hidden power of nostalgia. They act like you don't exist, like you were just a phase, a moment. something they walked away from without a second thought. But my friends, the mind doesn't work that way. You don't just erase real connections like deleting a file from a phone, but evaso vécu des nos and faux res ma. You don't just cut off emotions like flipping a switch, because whether they admit it or not, whether they pretend or not, you are still there. Not in their life, maybe, but in their mind. So folks, imagine this. You're walking through a crowded street, lost in your own world, and suddenly a scent hits you. Maybe it's the perfume of a stranger passing by. Maybe it's the smell of rain on pavement. Maybe it's the faint whiff of a place you used to go together. And just like that, you're transported. A flood of emotions, memories, thoughts. Things you weren't even trying to remember come rushing back. That's nostalgia. That's the hidden power of memory. And it's something they can't escape, because science proves it. Our brains are wired to attach emotions to past experiences. And the stronger the emotion, the harder it is to forget. And I know what some of you are thinking. But what if they really moved on? What if they don't think about me at all? My friends, let me hit you with the truth. They do. Maybe not all the time. Maybe not every second of the day, but in flashes, in waves, in unexpected moments that catch them off guard. A song, a place, a phrase someone says in passing. It doesn't take much. And when it hits, they feel it. They feel the absence, the difference, the space where you used to be. Because the brain doesn't just let go of something meaningful, it holds on to it, stores it, locks it away in the subconscious, waiting for the right trigger to bring it back. And here's the thing, they don't even have control over it. They can pretend, they can distract themselves, they can drown themselves in new experiences, new people, new routines. But no matter how far they run, no matter how much they try to replace you, their mind still remembers. And let's talk about why that matters. Because nostalgia is powerful. It's not just about memories, it's about emotion. It's about the way something made them feel. And when it comes back, it doesn't return as just a thought. It returns as a feeling they can't shake off. And that's where it starts to eat at them. Because suddenly, they're not as free as they thought. Suddenly, the idea that they had moved on cracks. Because if you were truly just a forgotten chapter in their life, then why? Why do these memories still hold weight? Why does hearing your name still make them pause? Why does a random song on the radio still make them zone out? Why does passing by a place you once shared still bring up a feeling they don't want to deal with? Because you were real, and real things don't just vanish. And let's be clear, this isn't about you waiting for them. You're not sitting around hoping they realize what they lost. You're moving forward. You're stepping into the next version of yourself, growing, evolving, thriving. But them, they're the ones haunted by what they never fully faced. Because nostalgia doesn't hit the ones who truly moved on. It only haunts the ones who left unfinished business. So say it with me. I am unforgettable. Write it in the comments. Show them, show yourself, show the world that you don't just disappear from people's lives, you leave a mark. Press that like button, subscribe, and stay with me, because what's coming next is going to make sure they never stop thinking about what they lost. Number 5. Dopamine crashes and the high of new distraction. So folks, let me give you another eye-opening quote. A legend once said, "You can run from reality, but reality never stops chasing you." They jump into new people, new places, new habits. They flood their schedule with plans, parties, and distractions. They laugh too loud, move too fast, and pretend like life has never been better. But my friends, if they were truly at peace, they wouldn't need to escape. Because here's the truth, they're not healing, they're numbing, and science proves it. So folks, imagine this. You're starving, and instead of eating real food, you reach for candy. That first bite? Instant rush. Sugar hits your bloodstream. Dopamine floods your brain, and for a moment you feel amazing. But then the crash. Your energy plummets. Hunger creeps back even stronger, and suddenly you realize you're worse off than before. That's exactly what's happening to them. See, dopamine is the brain's pleasure chemical. It's released when we experience something exciting. New love, fun nights out, social media validation. And when they throw themselves into distractions, that's just another sugar rush. But the thing about dopamine, it doesn't last. Science proves that chasing quick highs, whether through partying, rebounds, overworking, or fake confidence, creates a temporary sense of relief. But once that initial excitement fades, reality hits even harder. And I know what some of you are thinking. But what if they really are happy? What if they actually moved on? My friends, if their happiness was real, it wouldn't need constant reinforcement. Think about it. When someone is truly fulfilled, they're at peace. They don't need to be on all the time. They don't need to constantly surround themselves with noise. They're content in their own silence. But then they can't afford silence, because in the quiet, when the distractions stop, when the high fades and they're left alone with their thoughts, that's when it creeps in. The emptiness, the regret, the realization that no matter how many temporary highs they chase, they're still running from the same truth. And here's the kicker. Every new distraction burns them out even more. The brain adapts. It starts needing more and more stimulation to feel the same level of excitement. And that's why they keep chasing new faces, new hobbies, new thrills. But nothing really satisfies them, because what they're looking for can't be found outside of them. They thought losing you wouldn't matter. They thought moving on would be easy. But instead, they've put themselves in a cycle of temporary highs and painful crashes. And let's be honest, it's not sustainable. At some point, they'll get tired. The partying won't hit the same. The excitement of new people will wear off. The distractions won't be enough. And when that happens, that's when the truth they've been avoiding finally catches up. But you don't need to run. You don't need distractions to prove you're okay. You don't need fake highs to cover real emotions, because you're not numbing, you're growing. You're facing everything they're afraid to. And that's why, in the end, you win. So say it with me. I do not chase illusions. Write it in the comments. Show them, show yourself, show the world that you are done with quick highs and empty distractions. Number 6. Mirror neurons and the pain of seeing you move on. And I can bet they don't know this. Nothing haunts people more than watching you live the life they thought you'd struggle without. So they act like they don't see you, like your success, your glow, your evolution mean nothing to them. But let me tell you something, my friends, that's another lie. Because science says otherwise. The human brain is wired to feel what it sees. It's called mirror neurons, the part of the brain that makes people experience emotions simply by observing them in others. And guess what that means? Every time they see you thriving, they feel it. So folks, imagine this. You're sitting in a room, and someone across from you starts laughing hard. They're not even talking to you, not explaining the joke, but just hearing that laugh makes you feel the urge to smile. That's mirror neurons in action. You experience the energy you witness. But now let's flip it. Imagine someone sees you smiling, confident, free. They see you out there moving on, stepping into your best self without them. What happens? Their brain reacts. Even if they don't say it, they feel it. And what do they feel? Regret. See, people like to believe they're immune, that they can walk away, pretend you don't exist, carry on without a second thought. But the moment they see you genuinely happy without them, that's when reality shakes them. Because mirror neurons don't lie. And I know what some of you are thinking. But what if they never look? What if they avoid me completely? My friends, let's be real. They look. Maybe not directly, maybe not in obvious ways, but they check. They hear about you. They feel your energy in the way people talk about you. They sense your absence in places you used to be. And when they do, their brain reacts. Because the worst feeling in the world is realizing that someone who once needed you doesn't anymore. And here's where it gets even deeper. They thought you would fall apart. They assumed you'd be the one missing them, waiting, struggling to move forward. But instead, you became the version of yourself they never expected to see. And that hurts. Because when they left, they believed they had control. They thought, if I ever look back, they'll still be where I left them. But now they see you rising, elevating, thriving, and it burns. Why? Because your success is their proof of failure. If you can move on without them, if you can be happy without them, if you don't need them to shine, then maybe, just maybe, they were never as important as they thought. And that's a truth their ego can't handle. But here's the best part. You don't even need to try. You don't need to post for them. You don't need to prove anything. You don't need to rub your happiness in their face. Because the moment they see you, whether through a friend, a random scroll, or a whispered mention, they'll feel. And once they feel it, they'll realize that while they were busy pretending, distracting, and running from emotions, you were actually growing. And that's the real win. So say it with me. My growth speaks for itself. Write it in the comments. Show them, show yourself, show the world that you are done proving your worth, because your evolution already says everything. Number 7. The ego versus true happiness battle. They put on the show. They act like nothing touches them. They build a wall so high, so impenetrable, that even their own emotions can't get through. But my friends, that's not strength, that's fear. Because what they're protecting isn't their happiness, it's their ego. And folks, imagine this. There's a house standing tall, strong, unshaken by the wind. From the outside, it looks perfect, but inside, the foundation is cracking. The walls are rotting. The structure is barely holding together. That's them. From the outside, they seem fine, unbothered, thriving. But inside, their ego is holding their happiness hostage. See, science proves that people who let their ego lead are less capable of emotional healing. Why? Because the ego doesn't care about the truth. It only cares about appearances. And I know what some of you are thinking. But what if they really are happy? What if I'm just projecting? My friends, let me ask you this. If someone is truly at peace, do they need to prove it? No. Real happiness is quiet. It doesn't need an audience, it doesn't need applause, it doesn't need validation. But the ego craves those things. The ego needs to be seen, to be admired, to win. And that's why they perform instead of heal. That's why they'd rather fake happiness than admit they're struggling. Because to them, reaching out means surrender. Admitting they miss you means defeat. Accepting their emotions means facing the truth that they lost something valuable. And that's a battle their pride refuses to fight. But here's where they lose. Performative happiness is exhausting. keeping up the act, making sure no one sees the cracks, convincing themselves that they don't care. It takes effort, and the longer they fake it, the more draining it becomes. Eventually, the mask slips. They get tired of pretending. The weight of their own ego becomes too heavy to carry. And when that happens, they're left with nothing but the truth they tried so hard to avoid. Because real happiness doesn't come from running. It doesn't come from pretending. It comes from facing what's real, processing it and growing from it. And that's why in the end you win. Because while they're stuck in a battle with their own ego, you've already chosen truth. You're not pretending. You're not performing. You're not stuck in the same cycle of pride and regret. You faced the pain, you've processed it, and now you're free. So say it with me. I choose truth over ego. Write it in the comments. Show them, show yourself. Show the world that your peace is real, because you're not afraid to face it. Number 8. Why your silence hurts more than you know. They expected you to chase. They thought you'd check in, ask how they're doing, keep their ego fed with your attention. But instead, you went silent. You didn't beg, you didn't reach out, you didn't play into their games. And now, it's eating them alive. Because silence is powerful. It's the one thing their ego wasn't prepared for. And folks, imagine this, you're watching a movie and right at the most intense moment, the screen goes black. No sound, no resolution, just nothing. Your brain scrambles, trying to fill in the blanks, trying to make sense of the sudden emptiness. That frustration, that confusion, that need for closure. That's exactly what's happening to them. See, science proves that the human brain hates unfinished stories. It's wired to seek closure, to connect the dots, to fill in missing pieces. That's why, when you remove yourself, when you stop giving them explanations, when you let the silence do the talking, they don't get closure. And when there's no closure, the mind fills in the gaps. That's where the regret starts to build. Because every time they wonder why you haven't reached out, a seed of doubt is planted. At first they tell themselves, they'll come back. They always do. But days pass, weeks pass, maybe months, and still nothing. And that's when the panic sets in, because silence forces them to think. And the thoughts they were trying to suppress come flooding back. Did they misjudge you? Did they lose someone irreplaceable? Did they assume you'd always be there, only to realize too late that you're gone? The human mind wasn't built to handle silence like this. Because, let's be real, if you were still reaching out, if you were still showing them you cared, they could brush you off. They could convince themselves they still had control. But the moment you go silent, the moment you remove yourself entirely, that's when they feel it. That's when the absence turns into an ache they can't ignore. And I know what some of you are thinking. But what if they don't care? What if they really have moved on? My friends, let me ask you this. If someone truly didn't care, would they need to prove it? Would they need to make a show of their happiness? Would they need constant distractions to keep their mind busy? No, because people who truly move on don't avoid silence, they embrace it. They don't need to drown out their thoughts. They're at peace with them. But them, they can't afford silence. Because every quiet moment is a reminder that you're not there. And that's why they overcompensate. That's why they flood social media with their new, amazing life. That's why they act unbothered. That's why they pretend like they're doing better than ever. Because if they really didn't care, they wouldn't need to convince anyone, including themselves. And let's talk about why your silence is so much more powerful than words. See, when you argue, when you explain, when you try to make them see what they lost, you're still engaging. You're still giving them energy. As long as you're doing that, they still feel in control. But silence takes away their power. Silence forces them to face the one thing they were trying to avoid, themselves. And that's where the real pain begins. Because while they were expecting anger, begging, emotional breakdowns, what they weren't prepared for was nothing. No calls, no messages, no updates, no validation, just emptiness. And in that emptiness, their thoughts turn against them, because they expected you to need them, but instead you vanished. And nothing haunts the mind more than an unanswered question, because now they're left wondering, are you done? Have you moved on? Do you even think about them at all? And the beauty of it, they don't know. They don't know what you're feeling. They don't know if you're still hurting or if you've completely let go. And that uncertainty, it eats at them, because for the first time they don't have control. And let's be clear, this isn't about playing games. This isn't about trying to make them suffer. This is about reclaiming your power, because you don't owe them closure. You don't owe them explanations. You don't owe them anything. Your silence is the lesson. And one day, they'll break. They'll break. Maybe it'll be late at night, when the distractions have faded and the weight of their own choices settles in. Maybe it'll be when they see you glowing, thriving, living your life without them. Maybe it'll be when they reach for their phone, start typing that message, only to realize you don't owe them a response. And that's when they'll understand. But by then, you'll be too far ahead to care. So say it with me. My silence is my power. Write it in the comments. Show them. Show yourself. Show the world that you don't need to explain, prove, or justify. And there you have it, my friends. The truth they won't admit. The science behind why they can't escape it. And the power you hold without saying a word. While they battle their ego, chase distractions, and struggle with the silence, you are rising. Because real strength isn't in proving your worth, it's in knowing it. So keep moving forward, keep glowing, and let them deal with the weight of their own choices. If this hit home, drop "My silence is my power" in the comments, like this video, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs to hear this today.